I now call to the stage Mr. Jodi McKay, MP, New South Wales Leader of the Opposition, Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism and Member for Strathfield. Jodi was born in the regional New South Wales town of Gloucester, where she still has a property, she just told me, and began her career as a journalist. She has held several executive and non-executive roles in the leading non-for-profit health, science and research organisations. Jodi was the member for Newcastle between 2007 and 2011 and held 8 ministerial portfolios during her time in Parliament, including tourism, small business, women, science, medical research, commerce, minister assisting the Minister for Health. Her achievements include appointing the first ever New South Wales Chief Scientist, strengthening the state's domestic violence framework, championing the world-renowned Sydney Vivid Light Festival, which is spectacular, as well as hosting Oprah Winfrey's first ever visit to Australia. Following the 2011 election, Jodi relocated to Sydney and began working as an executive for the leading non-for-profit health organisation. She was elected member for Strathfield in 2015. I give you Jodi McKay.
Thank you very much, James, and I appreciate that warm welcome. Let me start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to elders past, present and of course emerging. And I want to thank James and Peter for the very kind invitation to speak to you today. I said to Peter and to James, I often go to your cocktail functions, but this is the first time I've had the opportunity to speak at your conference, and to all of you as delegates, I thank you very much for that. As James said, I'm a country girl. I grew up in Gloucester at the foot of the Barrington Tops, and over the weekend there was an article that was published in the Sydney Morning Herald, and some tell me I was too honest in that article because I spoke about my father, who worked in the dairy industry, and the fact that my memories of growing up are in the back of the Holden while he travelled the district artificially inseminating cattle. That is my memory of growing up with him, because that was his job. And over the weekend I was with Graham Forbes. His property is near ours, and he was telling me that a lot of the progeny there in his paddock were as a result of my father's work. So I was quite pleased about that. But some say that I'm too honest in telling people about my childhood. When I took on this role some 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks since I've been Leader of the Opposition here in New South Wales, I said that I wanted to do things differently. And for me, doing things differently includes re-engaging with rural and regional New South Wales. Can I say to you that I despair, and I'll put this on the record, I despair that when I'm travelling in rural New South Wales, even though people may be unhappy with the National Party, they still can't bring themselves to vote Labor. So what I have said is, if a girl from Gloucester in country New South Wales can lead the Labor Party in New South Wales, then people in country New South Wales can vote Labor. And my job, when I talk about how I'm going to do things differently, is very much about re-engaging with our rural and regional communities. During my first week as leader, I made sure I went to Cootamundra. And I did that because we will never win Cootamundra, but I want rural New South Wales, towns right across this state, to have a voice other than the National Party. And that is my job as a country girl who leads the Labor Party in New South Wales, to make sure that there are different voices in rural New South Wales. I want to, because we're only 3 weeks, of course, since we named our shadow cabinet as well, I want to just run through a couple of those people that you need to know in terms of who will be relevant to you as farmers in New South Wales. So what I did was I appointed Yasmin Catley, who's the deputy leader in the portfolio of rural and regional jobs, and that is an area that we are going to focus on. I believe that if rural communities are to thrive and not just survive, then we need to be a party that focuses on jobs in rural communities. When I finished my HSC 30 years ago, I left Gloucester because I had to get a job. I couldn't stay in a town of 2,500 people. And unfortunately, that is still the case, as all of you know, for many young people in rural communities. I want to work towards changing that. And that is why we now have a Shadow Minister for Rural and Regional Jobs. Many of you in this room know Mick Veitch, of course, who's our former shearer from Young. Mick has been a wonderful advocate for rural New South Wales, and he's taking on the portfolios of rural roads, rural affairs, and Western New South Wales. Jenny Aitchison, who's the member for Maitland, is taking on the shadow portfolio for primary industries. She's also a small business owner, so she knows the challenges of small business and has a wonderful relationship with primary producers in her area. And the last person I want to mention to you is Clayton Barr. He takes on the water portfolio, and he's the member for Cessnock. And I want to talk a little bit about water shortly. I think it's also important, I said this, I don't know who I said this to when I walked in, it may have been Chris, but I said that one of the important things that all of you need to know is that Labor people don't just come from the city areas. We have MPs who grew up in Canowindra and Dubbo and Albury and Tumut and of course Foster and Gloucester. So we have those deep and meaningful connections into rural communities right across the state. And I believe that as a Labor Party, we actually have a strong base to work off. And I was saying this to James earlier about the way that we worked with you as an association to deliver in the lead up to that March election what you asked for. We are very strong on the dairy and fresh food advocate. And I met with farmers from Dairy Connect, as I said, over the weekend. And my commitment to each and every one of you is to make sure that that advocate is not just an advocate in an agency, but it is an independent advocate and it is well resourced. We advocated for more co-ops, more money for co-ops and for businesses and startups to explore the new ways of doing business. We put on the table a $1 billion Safe Future, Safe Water Fund to improve town water by looking at infrastructure. We looked at $50 million for weeds and pests and more money for tackling those important issues around the risks of biosecurity. We had $32 million that we put on the table for land care to look at engaging more coordinators on a full-time basis. And we made a commitment to properly fund treatment for Q fever. And we're the only party that actually is talking about Q fever. And I said to James that I was really pleased to hear him tell his story yesterday. But I would say to each and every one of you, we stand with you on understanding the cost of those vaccines and the fact that there needs to be more research, and we'll continue to push that issue. Now, we'll go through a process as a shadow cabinet now of reviewing those policies, and we look forward to working with you over the next 3 years, which is 3 long years in opposition, to deliver on what you ask us for in the lead up to that next election in 2023. But I want to say I know that your interests extend beyond the farm gate, and I want us, as I said, to be a Labor Party that champions the issues of towns and communities in which you live and in which I grew up in. I want us to commit to materially improve the lives of people in rural, remote and regional communities, like a commitment to creating real jobs. So these are not just paper jobs counted by the Bureau of Statistics, paper jobs where you work a few hours and that job is counted as a job. We need to make sure that there are jobs where people want to live, that people don't feel they have to leave our rural communities to actually get a job. Because when you've got strong rural communities, you have a better New South Wales. Wales. We want to invest in nurses and other health workers because this is also important to rural communities. For us, it's not just building a shiny new hospital and cutting a ribbon, which is what we have currently. We know that those hospitals and health services have to be well resourced to be able to deliver for rural and regional and remote communities. We want to see an investment in education in our TAFE, and we don't want people who live in the Sydney metropolitan areas to have unfair access to TAFE and to building skills. We also want to put an end to what I call short-term thinking around the selling off of assets that have been built up over generations. We're talking about some $70 billion in assets that have been sold and around $14 billion, of course, in projects in Sydney that are currently over budget. Imagine what that $15 billion, which is the blowout in projects like the Sydney Light Rail, imagine what that could do in rural New South Wales. And let me put on the table that we're going to continue to be a party that talks about climate change and renewable energy. We are not going to walk away from that. It is fundamental to who we are. And when we went to the last election, we set a target of 50% renewable energy by 2023. And we remain completely and utterly committed to that. I look forward to having further discussions with you because I know that this is an issue important to all of you. I do want to talk very briefly today about the report that was released into water sharing because I think that's important for all of you. I know that many of you would know about this report and what has been released today, but it is a damning report on the water sharing plan since 2012. It's an indictment, I believe, on the National Party, and I'm going to say this because one of the things you will find with me as leader of the Labor Party is that I am straight talking. And this may be controversial in this room, and I know Adam Marshall is at the back and will be shaking his head, and I actually get on well with Adam. But we do not think the National Party should be in charge of water in this state. You have 3 successive National Party ministers that have presided over a water allocation scheme that has led to an unfair allocation. And I'm not talking about whether it's upstream or downstream. I'm not talking about who gets what. I'm talking about a fair allocation of water. And I'm going to put this out there. I know that there are many of you looking at me shaking your heads, but I am going to put it out there. Because that report has found that the way these water sharing plans have been managed, it has brought on a drought 3 years earlier than what that drought would have been. Now, the National Party claim that a drought has caused the issues in Western New South Wales, and they're right. But what this report by an independent commission has found is it's the National Party that has brought on that drought. And I encourage each and every one of you to read that report. It is a damning indictment on what is going on in water management in this state. I want to, I've only got 10 or 15 minutes here, but I do want to conclude my remarks by saying that there will be debates and disagreements we have with you. But as I said, as leader of the Labor Party and a girl who grew up in the country and still has family who live there and still has a property there, I will always talk straight with you. I will always talk straight with you about how we feel as a party, what we believe rural and regional communities need, and how we will deliver that. And I give a commitment to each and every one of you that I will be travelling this state. I won't stay in my office in Macquarie Street. Since I took over as leader 3 weeks ago, I've been out across New South Wales talking to people, talking to communities, to farmers. I've been in Western Sydney as well, of course, in the Hunter, the Central Coast, in the Illawarra. But importantly, I have been in rural, regional and remote New South Wales. I believe that as a Labor Party, we should have a Labor government that has people at the centre of everything that we do. When I started or confirmed my leadership, I spoke about us being a big tent party with a big heart. And that's the challenge before me, to make sure that the policies we produce, the decisions that we make, the conversations that we have are relevant to everyone, no matter where where they live. That is the commitment I make to you, because we know that farming is more than an economic sector. When you go to country towns like I do, and if you're fortunate enough to have grown up there like I have, you understand that farming and what you do is part of the social fabric of towns and communities. So I need all of you to know, whether you agree with the comments I've made today or not, I need all of you to know, as I said, that I will always talk straight with you, and I will always make sure that we are a Labor Party that doesn't just focus on the city, but focus on rural, regional and remote communities across this state. And I will be a leader that will have those difficult conversations with you, but always be there to support jobs in rural and remote communities and work with you as farmers and as an association. Can I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Unfortunately, I won't be drinking with you this evening, as I have in previous years. I'm actually attending the Fresh Awards for Sydney Market, so I'm continuing the theme, if you like, but on the other end. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I very much appreciate it, and I look forward to working closely with all of you over the next 3 years as Leader of the Opposition. Thank you.